And welcome back to AR Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I am A.R. and today we have a special treat. All right. We can call this episode Milk Bones because it is a treat for you, ladies and gentlemen. Jason Lady is here with us today, kidlit author of Monster Problems and Super Problems. Honestly, I came in contact with his work just simply on Instagram, searching on different comic books, graphics, art. His cover art stood out to me like a punch in the gut when you just woke up in the morning, but in the best way possible. It really is just phenomenal, eye-catching. It's candy. It's visual candy, honestly. And I am more than excited to have him with me today. We're going to be talking about his process, his content, and what is to come in the future. Without any further ado, Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, AR. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Now, just to dive right into it, where did those cover ideas come from? Where did the idea for Monster Problems, Super Problems, where did that gestate from?
Sure.
Gestate. I don't think that was the right word. I feel icky using
gestate.
it.
Yeah. Not a word you hear every day, too. You know.
Nope.
Kudos to you for tackling that, saying that out loud. You know, I don't know if I would have attempted it. Lots of words that we read and we never say out loud, and then when we finally do, it's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe that's not how it's said.
Lieutenant, not spelled anywhere close to how it's read. My God, if I would have read that first, it would have been La Uniet. Huh.
Right, exactly. It's like, yeah, I love that feature on the internet where you can have like dictionary.com and websites like that, like say words to you audibly, because then you can actually hear how some things are said before you attempt it. So, you know, that's a nice tool to have and avoid an embarrassment potentially trying to do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, you asked about the idea for Monster Problems and where this series of books came from and the cover designs. So a lot of it goes back to I got out of college back in 1999. I knew that I wanted to write on the side, you know, have a career doing something else, but also have writing be something that I do, you know, on the side of things. And at first I wrote a couple manuscripts for kind of aimed at adult audiences, and they were like action adventure, science fiction. And it was good practice, but I got the sense when I was writing it, it's really aren't great, you know? So I was really struggling what to do and figure out who my target audience should be. And my wife actually suggested, you know, why don't you try writing for kids? Why don't you try writing for middle school kids, in fact? Because she noticed that I happen to get along with middle school kids really well, I guess because I'm a middle school kid at heart, maybe. And she suggested that. And she also had the idea, what if there was a kid who had a magic pen and everything they drew became real? So I took that nugget of an idea and kind of ran with it and wrote Monster Problems, which is about a sixth grader who does obtain a magic pen. And before he knows it's magical, he draws a monster to go after his bratty little brother who he's angry at the moment. It's kind of a cathartic thing to draw this monster. He's happy, goes to bed, pleased with himself, wakes up the next day and is horrified to realize this monster is now real and is like, I'm going to go get your brother for you, just like you drew me to do, just like you created me to do. And adventure and all sorts of insanity and absurdity ensues after that. And so when it came down to the cover design, I'll just hold the book up here. I really had the idea of this picture becoming real. Yeah, thank you. No, thank you for your kind words about the picture. Had this thought about this drawing rising out of the paper. You can see the drawing desk here. You can see the piece of paper taped to the desk, and you can see the magic pen kind of floating there. He's kind of dropped it as he's like startled and recoiling from it. And this picture that he's drawn is, you know, rising out of the page in front of him and scaring him. And so I just had that vision in my head. And so when it came time to design the cover, the publisher, my publisher is Black Rose Writing. They're super collaborative and very open to, you know, what do you want as the author? What do you want your book to look like? I've heard horror stories of some authors who they work with a publisher who doesn't even consult with them, just goes out, slaps a cover on that book, and the author's just like, that's not what I envision anything looking like. Oh no. And they're just stuck with it. Whereas my publisher, like I said, they were very collaborative, and they said, what do you want what style of art do you want for your cover? Do you have an idea of what you want it to look like? I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly how I want it to look like. And they said, well, what do you want the style to be? And I said, Scooby-Doo's kind of the tone I have in mind, kind of Scooby-Doo and the Mystery Machine and that group of characters that goes around kind of solving mysteries, and their adventures are kind of wacky and goofy, like something that looks like that. So they found a freelance artist. His name is Chuck Carson. He's on Instagram as the Animated Pencil. He lives in Texas. I live in Ohio. He and I have never met in person. We've only talked on the phone and communicated via Instagram messages. But they put me in touch with him, and he and I worked together. And he got it exactly right, almost right off the bat. We just had to have a few tweaks here and there, and things evolved from there. And he made the cover, that you saw just a moment ago. So it's fabulous. I couldn't have asked for a better cover art. In fact, it's better than I imagined. So I would say that I got very lucky in that regard with the covers. And I've been at book signing events where I have the book like sitting there kind of on a stand, and you can just see kids come in and just kind of get drawn to it, like, what's that? I want to find out more about that, and they come over with their parents, and those are always fun encounters. But yeah, that's how the cover came to be.
My God, that's phenomenal. And especially just the idea, monster problems. It's one of those things that it's like the planets aligning. Everything is just like perfect. The concept is perfect. The characterization is perfect. The cover is perfect, and it has a catchy title like that, Monster Problems. I mean, it is the trifecta of just perfect, especially coming from the author standpoint of actually creating something like that. I feel like one of the biggest anxiety-inducing moments is actually putting a name on your project, because now that thing that you're so passionate about, that baby of yours, now you're putting a name to it, and that name can make or break what that project is. I mean, if it's too much of a weird name, then people, it's simply off-putting before a person even gets a chance to pick it up, just because the name is off-putting. But no, you got on the exact opposite head on that one. Monster Problems. Like you said, it just draws the eyes. It really does.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're right. The stars kind of aligned for all of that. Great title and great picture. And something else I was keeping in mind too, I'd gotten some advice from another writer who I know who had some books published already. And, he said, people are going to be scrolling through a lot of times on Amazon.com, or they're going to be on BarnesandNoble.com. They're going to be on some website, Goodreads, they're going to be scrolling through, and they're only going to see a little thumbnail of your cover. It's going to be really tiny on their screen. So that image has to be eye-catching yet simple. So it's like, okay, I can't pack too much into that. I've got to keep it simple. So that was another consideration too. And you're right about the title, because sometimes people are viewing it like that, right? It's lined up. You just see the spine. You see a bunch of these lined up on a bookshelf. And so it's got to be something that grabs them. So you're absolutely right. It's kind of, it's tricky. And I think you're alluding to this, is that you as an author, you have to write the story, and you have to think about plot development and characters and things like that. But then you also have to put your marketing hat on too, once you're done with it. And, you've dealt with that as well with your books, where you have to think through, there has to be an appealing package around this story. The story could be the greatest story in the world, but if the cover isn't good and the title, doesn't grab people, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, honestly, if you don't think those things through.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real world application of it are always there, but we don't actually think about it until it's like put in our face. I mean, how many TV shows or movies are you a die-hard fan of? I mean, die-hard fan of. And you talk to another person about it, it's like, oh no, I've never heard about that in my life. You never heard about that in your life? Oh, that's my favorite movie. It's like, nah, never. And then you look into it, they're like horrible, in the theaters. It like lost the studio a ton of money. All the actors are now like blacklisted in the industry. But hey, it's your favorite movie. Has an
F rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, Rotten Tomatoes doesn't even have it up. It's on Rotten Eggplant. There is nothing.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, there's nothing. I don't know. There's nothing more just, I guess, like eye-opening than that. Or even if you look at your favorite. I mean, you can look up Harry Potter, you look up any series ever, you go on Amazon, you're going to find negative reviews about it, 1-star reviews, just random things. There's always going to be, your audience, and you have to find that audience. But not only that, you have to look for your audience. It's marketing. You have to like bring your audience to you. You have to have something that has appeal, and you have to have something that is eye catching. And like you've really like hit the nail on the head with that, and especially with how you progressed. Again, there's something about that cover. It reminds me back to Captain Underpants. That's why it brings me back. The art style. It
Okay.
brings me right back to that, and it's almost a nostalgia that it brings with it. It's not even almost a name, but just even the style in itself immediately is like, oh yeah, I want to read something like that. Just like I want to
Mhm.
be back in that energy again. Not even as just like a child, but from an adult standpoint. It's phenomenal, honestly.
Good, good. No, I'm glad that it invokes those thoughts in you, makes you think of Captain Underpants, because it's definitely if you think of like a big group of books that are all kind of similar, I do put my books in with, Captain Underpants, as well as, say Dogman or Diary of a Fifth Grade Ninja. There's several books they're all kind of similar in tone, where yeah, there's an interesting story. There's a fun adventure story going on there. There's some character development. There's also just lots of humor too. And, my books have lots of just funny humor stuff that I try to put in there. And, the reason I do that is that the middle grade audience, loves absurdity, loves funny stuff. They haven't gotten too old where they're so serious that they're like, well, I can't laugh at that silly stuff anymore. I can only read, serious literature now. They're still at that age where it's like, yeah, I can really appreciate humor. And so I can inject that into the stories. And so, yeah, Captain Underpants and books kind of that ilk are, definitely in the family, I would say, of books that are like this. So I'm glad it brought back, those feelings for you, because that's exactly kind of where I was coming from with these books for sure.
Now, you brought up something else because to me, I think humor is one of because there's a lot of different things that are like difficult to write, but one of the hardest things to translate in writing, especially in a book, because not only are people's humor different from one another, but just the actual medium itself. I mean, there's a reason a comedian is on the stage and they're doing like an act. And there's just the way of a person saying something, and your timing and the pauses that you take as you say something. Those all add to the comedic effect of something. So, how do you tackle that of writing those type of scenes? How do you
Yeah,
invoke that humorous thing? I love that. So I love humor. It's one of my favorite things to catch in books, especially when it's just done in like a nice. You have something like, I mean, let's be honest. No, I don't care how old you get, and I don't know. Maybe it's like a cultural thing, or maybe I don't know what it is. But farting is just kind of always fun, especially like in the right aspect.
yes.
They're like one of my favorite scenes in like a comedy movie. It's like Not Another Teen Movie, and like the teacher is talking about. There's like a scene that the English teacher is talking about like what true comedy is. He's talking about that like the thespian, like the Shakespearean turn of a phrase, the wit. Like that's what true humor is, not like some potty mouth XYZ blah blah blah. And that scene is being juxtapositioned with like a bathroom right above him, and there's like these two people having like a horrible like bathroom like situation going on, and then of course like the climax of like both the scenes is in the bathroom opens up and just like dumps all over this teacher as he's like saying this huge like thing. And I always love the
Oh.
scene, not simply for the absurdity of it, but actually what they're saying. It's like
Mhm.
we all understand that wit is amazing, that like that type of humor and like that type of highbrow comedy is amazing, but it's never gonna
Mhm.
beat out a good fart sometimes,
No, it's true. There's certain things that are funny no matter how old you are too, and you're right. That's one of them. You could say that same style of joke or same style of scene in a movie to your grandparents, to your parents, to you, to like a kid of any age, and like they're all kind of gonna chuckle or giggle at that same kind of thing. Some things just transcend the generations.
Always. There was
For sure.
I was at a wedding once, and it was right at like the I do phase of it. It's like, very emotional. XYZ is like, everyone's saying all these things, and it's everyone's in that energy. And a younger cousin of mine out of nowhere just lets one rip. And I'm talking about the church is quiet. And he got so embarrassed. He's younger again, so he got so embarrassed that he stood up for a second, like, "Oh damn!" Like, I didn't do that. And I'm trying to tell you, the entire church, every age, the minister, I'm sure the people outside, the valets, they were all laughing. It was the funniest thing ever. Bride, groom, everyone on the court, everybody was laughing. It was the funniest thing ever.
It's like something very serious and solemn, and then it's completely undercut by something ridiculous, right? That's where a lot of the funny part of that comes from. It's like, oh, there's something that, people might be getting kind of teary-eyed and very emotional and like very serious, and oh, this is such a beautiful moment, and then a bodily function happens in a loud way in that room. There's something about that kind of situation that's gonna, like I said, transcend any age to think that's amusing. So yeah, that's a great example.
And you actually kind of like got to what I was alluding to, and what I was gonna allude to was like the whole idea that is when it comes to writing, I think anyway, is that in order to like understand those type of situations, is that like real organic situations like that have to be understood and dissected. And it's exactly what you said. If you think about it kind of like in a more just basic way, the humor of it came from a juxtaposition of emotion. You have this height of emotion in one way, and then the sudden act out of nowhere, taking it completely the other way, and that's where the humor comes from. It's like, oh man, like, at that moment, you know what I mean? It would be like if somebody, a same situation would be if you were at like a funeral and you have a really embarrassing ringtone. And at that moment, as like, the thing, and everyone's at the height of crying, and like, a eulogies being said, "We are the champions, my friends," starts playing in the background, and you're like, oh shit,
right.
What I mean?
Completely incongruous to the tone of what's going on. Yeah. It's like, oh, whoops.
Yeah. So I think juxtapositions like that are like what make everything. And if you think about it even more in like a bigger sense, I think it works for just about everything. One of the Red Wing and the Red Wedding in the Game of Thrones. Why was that so visceral? It's because it was a distinct juxtaposition. It was a wedding at the height of like what you think is happiness. This person's pregnant, everyone's having a good time, and then in 4 seconds it just turns like sinister. That's what makes it like heart wrenching. It's what makes it gut wrenching. When you're watching a show that's depicting battle, they're preparing for battle. So the entire time you have that like, okay, yes, it's getting ready, and it's like amping you up. But when it just switches like that, that's when it hits hard.
Right. Yeah, because you're seeing kind of the peacefulness and the beauty of what can be going on over here, and you're seeing like the juxtaposition with something horrible going on over there, and that makes for very memorable drama for sure. Something in Monster Problems that is kind of like that a little bit is so you have the monster I spoke of. This monster becomes real after it's drawn with the magic pen. It's after his little brother. And you think, oh my gosh, a monster. This monster is not really a scary monster. He kind of wants to be. He's a little more just kind of dutiful. He's just going about his duty, basically. You drew me to go get your little brother. I'm going to go do that. But he keeps getting sidetracked by stuff. So no one can see the monster except Brad, the main character who drew the monster, and his little brother. They're the only people that can see it. And so they're at school, and the monster's roaming the halls, and no one can see the monster at all. But he gets sidetracked by tater tots, of all things. And Brad finds him, and he's like eating tater tots. He's like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, this is delicious, And he's like, but don't worry, I'll get back to going after your little brother in a moment, But first, I gotta, I gotta have a snack here. And then later, the cafeteria workers are like, what happened to all the tater tots? They're all gone. Looks like a bear broke into the cafeteria and ate them all. And so it's kind of stuff like that, where it's like this monster that you would think is going to be big and scary and terrifying and stuff like that, like just keeps doing stuff like that to undercut itself, its own menace, really. By getting sidetracked along the way, and and it's a good thing, because it's kind of like delaying him from going after the brother, and Brad can figure out what to do in the meantime. So it's a little bit of a plot device too, but it's also kind of something that's amusing. Like, wow, this monster just can't help himself. He's got to go eat those tater tots, even though he's got a mission to accomplish.
God, I love that. Again, it's one of my favorite things the authors do. That it's like, not only do they come up with a concept that's like seemingly cool, but they also like ground it in a way that's like, oh yeah, well, like that makes a lot of sense actually. It's one of those things. Like if I were to just tell you out of the blue, without thinking, it would be like, oh, that's weird. But then you think about it for a second, it's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually.
Yeah, because anything like that, I mean, you watch like a horror movie, a monster movie, it's usually a pretty single-minded creature that they have to deal with, and it's like, oh yeah, but if it has any kind of consciousness, wouldn't it have some like small desires? It want to go snack on that, or get distracted by this, just like we do, right? We go through the day and we get sidetracked by stuff, and it's like, why not the monster? He's supposed to be in pursuit of a goal, but instead he's doing something else he's really wasn't drawn to do, but he's over there doing it anyway. So yeah. So it's kind of like that juxtaposition of something potentially really scary and horrible with something just ridiculous that he's doing over here.
Well, I like it because it's the freedom of kid lit.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that, like that you can take a situation like that. Because again, that's the cool thing about like authorship. If you were to give that same concept over to Stephen King, it would be the latest horror movie for 2023. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's just how you decide to take the concept that, where instead of like making a monster that's like, somehow it's like a haunting situation, it's like, like over the little brother, and it's like a whole like thriller of trying to get the monster to stop. It's a comedy now because like monster itself a little bit sillier, and he can just take the plot in any which way you want. So you have your main character, you have his little brother, you have this monster character. How did you flesh out the rest of the world? I'm always interested to see how kid lit authors treat other adults in a story. Like, do they go the Peanuts route where it's like everything is wah, 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 or
adults are kind of invisible.
Yeah. Or is it like the Disney Channel, or is it like the Disney Channel approach where the adults are somehow like 4-year-olds and like the 12-year-old like runs the house somehow, and it's like they're somehow paying the bills and everything.
right. Like the adults don't seem like they really do anything. Yeah.
The adults are just like, hey, honey, what do you have for dinner tonight? And like, I was like, okay.
They're just clueless. They're just completely clueless. Yeah. And the kids are up to all this stuff the adults are just completely clueless about, Yeah. And the kids are like, hey, there's this big thing happening. The adults are like, yeah, whatever. I'm watching TV right now. Go away, And it's like, okay, I guess we got to deal with this without the adults' help because they're not listening to us.
Always.
And that kind of plays into, kids often have, flights of fancy and big like imagination, things that they're doing while they're playing. And sometimes they get carried away and they're like, hey, mom, dad. And mom and dad are kind of like, yeah, whatever. I have things to do. And the kid's like, no, wait, so it kind of plays into a lot of that kind of thing,
I guess that is true.
Yeah. But you asked about the adult characters. So a lot of it, and some of the stuff in this story is definitely me thinking back to middle school and kind of my own things I went through in middle school. And so the main character in this story, Brad, he gets in trouble for drawing in class. He's drawing and not paying attention. He gets put in the hallway and his parents get called, and he gets his drawing privileges taken away, which for a kid like him, who he views as the only thing he's good at, that's just torture not to have that. That's part of, and his little brother makes fun of him. That's why he's bitter at his little brother at that point. And that's why he ends up drawing the monster. And so I wanted to have kind of a balance of the adults. I wanted to have a sympathetic adult. And since he's a kid who's artistic and likes to draw, I decided, hey, let's have the art teacher be like a sympathetic adult. Let's have a sympathetic adult in there. And it turns out there's a little more than meets the eye with the art teacher. I won't spoil anything, but he is a reoccurring character. He appears in all these Magic Pen books. He's also in Super Problems as well. And he's a little bit of a mentor kind of figure to whichever kid has the Magic Pen. Each one of these books has a different kid with the Magic Pen in them. And so you kind of have someone like that in there who's going to be helpful. But I never want the adults to come in and solve everything. I want the kids to kind of be the instigators of the action, to be the ones who figure out what to do. They're the stars of the story. So the adults can be helpful, but they are kind of in the background. And then the other thing too, I wanted to have adults in the story that are just a little weird, just a little off from normal. And part of that's for the humor aspect. And part of that just because, to kids, adults are a little weird, aren't they? I mean, they're a little strange. They do things that kids don't understand. They're at jobs all day and they're doing things like paying bills, and they're talking about boring stuff like insurance and real estate and stuff like that. Kids are just like baffled by adults. They don't seem like they play very much, and I don't know what's wrong with them. And so I'd like to have a couple adults in there who are like a little just weird, and one of them is a school principal in this story. He's definitely different when you get to meet him. He gets involved. You think Brad's going to get in trouble, and it goes a whole different direction. And it turns out this principal has some sides to him that no one really knew about that are kind of fun. And then I have one teacher for the homeroom class. I remember homeroom when I was a kid. You didn't do much in homeroom. You just kind of showed up and hung out for a while, heard the announcements for the day. This teacher is just like drinking coffee and on her cell phone with her friends like the entire time. And when Brad is like, hey, can I leave? He's trying to make an excuse to leave the room to go see what the monster's doing, but he fakes like, hey, I have to go to the bathroom. And she's like, to her friend, she's like, hold on, one of these kids wants something. And then she's kind of like, what do you want, kid? And it's kind of like that. It's kind of like, why is she just talking to her friend instead of doing her job? It's just like little weird stuff I speckle through there. But circling back to the principal, though, I realized after a while most of the story takes place in one school day. There's this invisible monster in the school. Only Brad and his brother can see it. All this like crazy stuff happening. And I realized after a while I needed to have kind of the cover of an administrative figure of the school kind of helping and kind of sanctioning what was going on to some extent. So I was like, I need to bring the principal into it, but bring it in a really weird way. So some of it is serving the needs of the story. You realize after a while, logically, these kids can't run rampant through the hallways without getting in trouble. So the principal has to be involved, kind of saying, hey, this is all right that you do this. So sometimes it's by necessity, bring that adult figure in who serves some kind of purpose, but maybe make them kind of memorable and weird, too. But then also, just to kind of show that, the adults are a little strange, and it's because kids really think adults are kind of weird, to be honest with you. And, we can be honest, actually, adults are kind of strange when you think about it. So they're kind of in two different worlds. That's kind of what happens when I kind of figure out what to do with the adult characters.
God, I love that vantage point of looking at things from like the a kid's telescope, if you want to like look about that way. Yeah. It's not, really comparative at genres, but age frame anyway. But Rick and Morty, one of my favorite jokes that they have in there, that's actually a very like PG joke, is there's Rick is having an argument with the dad about why school is useless, because the dad's obviously like, it's like, hey, stop taking my son on adventures, he needs to go to school. And his explanation is like, school is for a bunch of like stupid people, all they do is sit around and say 2 + 2 4, what is that? And obviously it's funny because like you're thinking to yourself, well, that's not how school actually works. You can just sit there and like
right,
do addition out loud like it's
there's more to it than that.
Like it's like Little House on the Prairie. That's not how it goes, right? And then, of course, it just does like a very casual segue. And in the background, you can hear like the teacher going like, all right, class, let's go. 2 + 2, 4. 8 + 8, 16.
It's all like,
It's perfect. Exactly how the man said he was, like the huge like hyperbole that he made, and it's actually what ended up being.
Yeah, it's like he's not exaggerating. Yeah, he's actually not exaggerating.
I love things like that. Like if you were to say that like, oh, my dad's always like the kid goes like, oh man, my dad's always like a lawnmower, and then like mowing the lawn. There's obviously a huge exaggeration. Yeah. And then like end of the episode, end of the chapter, it's like 4 a.m. and
mowing the lawn. Anytime you go by the house, he's still mowing the lawn.
Yeah, especially if you like interweave it with like different emotions, like you're running away from a monster, and so that just position of like being scared that you look over, it's like 5 a.m, nothing else is out, but you just hear
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all about the tone you're going for, and for me, I was like, I could go over to a certain side of things and make this kind of a suspenseful, kind of more scary story. I mean, there's a place for that, there is, for that genre, but I was like, yeah, that's not really me. And that's not really the story I want to write. Stuff that potentially could be kind of scary or freaky. Yeah, I always do stuff like that. If there's something scary going on in the front, there's something, absurd going on back here to kind of undercut it and make it not quite so scary.
Yeah. How do you play with the emotions that you want to, because that I guess that is the one limiting factor of kids lit, where if you do want to take it up to like a couple like more levels, there is a age frame to be worried about. So how do you deal with that? Like if you done it, like you said, like a simple jump scare, A simple
Mhm.
like fearful type of thing. Even like the description of the monster, you could go like a little bit too far in one direction and make it a little more gruesome than expected. How do you deal with that? With that those type of, I guess, like borders? But even then, it's not really a border because if I think if you're doing kid lit, I don't think you have much of a want to be taught like to be writing about gruesome murders anyway at the time being. But
Yeah.
do you find any limitations in when it comes to writing, especially as obviously being an adult? Because when you're a kid, you always think that kid stuff is made by kids. I
Right. Other
yeah,
kids are writing this. Yeah.
yeah. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that I realized that, like, adults were writing the stuff that I based my childhood off of, which in itself is a
Yeah.
kind of a
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. When you
kind of
think about that, it's like,
paradoxical. Yeah,
huh.
it's like, oh, that's something.
Well, and part of that is, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but, me thinking back to, again, a couple different things. Like one is like, what would I have wanted to read when I was that age? What would I have found appealing? What are the kinds of books that, I would have wanted to be in existence, when I was that age, and try to write books that I would have liked, at that age. But then the other part of it is too, is, again, me thinking back to, being that age, being in middle school, like sixth grade, seventh grade, and thinking about, what was the angst that I was dealing with, what were the issues I was dealing with? Because I think that, we're talking about some things being universal. I went to middle school longer ago than I'm going to say at this point. I could say it. It was the late 80s, early 90s. But there's some things that transcend generations that kids, no matter what era of life, no matter what generation you're living in, you're going to be worried about those things or find those things to be difficult. The second book, I'll just hold it up real quick. Super Problems. This one is about a different kid who gets the magic pen and he draws himself and his friends as superheroes. And this is based on me. I was a military kid. We moved 7 times when I was growing up. And so you come to a new school, new classmates. You want to do something to kind of ingratiate yourself to the other kids. And I was doing this on kind of a subconscious level. Looking back at it, I recognize it. I don't think at the time I was thinking of it this way, but I would draw all my friends as superheroes into my own comic books that I would draw myself, and that really helped like all the kids like bond together and stuff. So a lot of that kind of thing I put into this book. The main character in Super Problems is the new kid in town, and he meets new friends, and so he's going through that whole thing where like, oh, I miss my old friends, and oh, I'm starting to slowly make some new friends, and and he draws them into his own comic book, and they all start bonding and becoming friends. So I kind of think back on stuff from when I was a kid and say, what would be realistic to have in this story? What are things, real emotions that kids are going to be dealing with? Whether that's having all your drawing privileges taken away from you and feeling like I'm only really good in one subject, art, not good in anything else. My little brother is a genius and he's good in every subject and I'm jealous of him. That stuff I think any kid can relate to in some form or fashion. No matter what the sibling dynamic is, older or younger, you're going to have a little bit of that kind of rivalry. And then in the other book, I think any kid who's moved or changed schools, they found themselves in that situation where like, wow, I'm new here. What am I going to do to kind of fit in? So kind of steering it back a little more to what you asked about though, not going over the line, making things like too horrible, too grotesque and things like that. The monsters, going back to the monster, he's another great example because I could have gone one way and made him like very scary and grotesque seeming, he could have been like, he could have had like warts oozing pus and like things like that would just been really just like disgusting, but there's a line between disgusting and then just gross, and so with this monster, I had him smelling like rubber tires, which isn't like the most unpleasant smell in the world. It's also not great either, so he smells like rubber tires and he leaves orange slime behind him everywhere he goes. And that's how you can kind of see where he's gone, because he's left slime behind him. And so that's part of the whole thing too, is what can I put in there that would actually be kind of amusing and maybe kind of gross, like, oh, slime, oh, he smells like rubber tires, but not grotesque, not horrific, not like something that would be in a horror movie. It's like kind of that, but then taken down a few levels from that, where it's no longer like scary, it's just kind of gross, weird, even kind of amusing, kind of stuff. So it's really being sensitive to kind of like the there's a spectrum there, and being sensitive to where you need to land on that to get the tone that you want. Like I said earlier, you could be over on the horror movie kind of side of things, but if you don't want that kind of approach, especially with kids, like you say, especially younger kids, you do have to be mindful of that. You're going to want to bring yourself a few shades over on the spectrum and kind of figure out where you're going to land. And I think that's kind of an intuition kind of thing. And this is the kind of stuff where other people reading your work, anybody out there who is writing and wants to get published or even just writes for fun, it's great to have other people read your stuff, because they can kind of be a good person to bounce off of and say, yeah, the tone of what you're doing, it's not quite what you're going for. You're missing it a little bit. Let's bring it over here, and I'll give you some suggestions how. That's one of the best things you do as other people read your work and just let you know if you're on track. It's been super helpful for me over the years.
My God, no better thing has ever been said. It is very interesting the echo chamber that you can be in while you're doing edits, where you're so focused, especially that I view writing sometimes as math, is that you have like all the equations and all the like knowledge of how to solve a problem, but sometimes you hit a problem that really requires you to use a lot of different methods, like, oh, what can I do in order to make it as simple for me to proceed? And for me, that's like the fun of writing, right? It's like getting, you have a scene, you have what you want to do, the emotion you want to convey. It's like, all right, now how do I convey that emotion in the most non-contrived way? How can I do it while adding humor? How can I do it while not losing the reader? How can I do it while moving the plot forward? That's like the whole fun of it, right? Mm-hmm. So there is nothing better than that security of like, not like, you read it yourself and obviously you know what's going on. You wrote it. You can take off 50% of the words. You still can understand that you wrote it.
Yes, exactly.
So the goal is to make sure somebody else with no knowledge of what you have can read it and at least get a ballpark of the same emotion that you're trying to convey.
Oh yeah, someone said that to me years and years ago, but they were like, I don't know what it is to be in your head. You kind of gotta write this so that someone who's not in your head gets what's going on. Mm-hmm. And that really kind of clicked, and I was like, oh, kind of one of those light bulb moments, like, okay, I get what they're saying, and you need to be mindful of that. And yeah, it's a good temperature gauge kind of thing, just to have other people read your work and let you know, are you on the right track with it or not. It's invaluable. And if you've had the opportunity to do that for other people too, that's just such a great privilege and just such a cool thing. It can get you out of your comfort zone, read stuff that's you wouldn't normally read, but also to be helpful for other people in that way and bounce off. Them bouncing their work off of you is a really good thing to do. There's I call it the community of writers. I think there's things that writers can or should do for each other. And anybody who's writing, find your people, find that group. Whether they're online, whether they live in your community, but find them, and they'll sharpen your work definitely and make it better than when you started. Without
a single doubt. I mean, I'm not going to drop any names, but I have an author friend who writes erotic romance. But her descriptions of food are unparalleled. I mean, she should be working as a food blogger. Unparalleled. I'm not like, not to take doesn't take away from the rest of her writing. I'm not saying that it somehow that's like the one rough in the diamond. I mean, like diamond in the rough. She's written a lot of books. She's an accomplished writer. But to me, it's that food writing. Mm-hmm. It just draws me in. It is insane. It is like crazy good. And I've learned so much just off of that. The little nuances that people have are great. I mean, there are people that are very famous that have become so just from little nuances. I mean,
yep.
I personally never read them, but the whole Twilight series and like the whole like Shades of Grey series, always remark of how cheesy and how like just cringy some of the dialogue can be. Mm-hmm. But the heart of it, what people are going for are the non-cringy bits, and she's made an entire career off it. More people have read her books than they've read the Bible, and that's a fact. So Bible's been around
Right.
for a while, buddy.
Pro- Probably so. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're not wrong about that whole thing. I mean, there are some writers where their name is a brand, and when you get that book, you pick it up at the bookstore, pick it up at the airport, pick it up at the library. You know what you're getting. No matter which one of the 15 books it is, you know what you're getting. Jodi Picoult is one like that. I've read a few of her books, and she definitely has a kind of story that she writes, and it's entertaining and it sucks you in. You can't put this book down, and it's a page turner. Tom Clancy is another one. I read a lot of his books growing up, and you knew exactly what you're in for: military, technological, spy, action, adventure, mystery, and you're in for a wild ride. When you jump into one of those books, you just know it. And so, yeah, some people are really good at having their niche, and yeah, and that is the great thing about reading a lot of books, but also knowing a lot of writers and helping a lot of other writers. You mentioned the genre that your friend writes for. I'm in a critique group that meets every month, and one person in the critique group, in the group in particular, I've known her for years at this point. We met through the Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators, and we've just kind of stayed in touch. And we've always had our critique group with different other people coming in and out. But she's just gotten published, and her book is a lot of it. It tells a story, but there are sections of it from a particular character's point of view that are not written in prose. They're actually written like verse, like song lyrics or poetry. And I admire this so much, and it's beautiful. And I'm just think it's so brave to do something like that. That's so different. I would, I think I have some, fairly different, unique ideas in my books, but I'm like, I haven't done anything like that, where I've just done something that's like so different than the mainstream.
Like the
And,
Odyssey, like a poem.
yeah, it's like that, the Iliad, the Odyssey. But then you go to a different character's point of view in her book, and it's just prose, traditional, he said, she said, I saw this, I saw that kind of prose. Then it jumps back to the, I'll give her a shout out, Tamara Belko, and her book is Perchance to Dream, and it just got released, and her writing is just beautiful. And it's like stuff that I would never tackle. I'd be like, no, I can't do that. That's, you got to kind of know, your lane and your niche, and kind of stay in that niche. And that's a key thing, finding your niche too. Like I alluded to earlier, when we started talking about, what was my audience going to be, middle grade, that's kind of where my sensibilities are, let's do that. And, and stick with that for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, especially with like the internet. I mean, like everything that the internet has shown me is that, there is no more definition of like quote unquote weird, you know? I mean, there are millions upon millions of people, grown men that watch My Little Pony. And listen, I'm not knocking anybody. I'm just saying a fact here. Millions of people. There are millions deep. They have conventions, and it's global. That's a real thing. So like the internet just allows you to find the people that like have your interests, and like especially when it comes to books and to niche. I think as like an author, like it's the one thing that my editor told me that really just stuck with me. Well, not the one thing, but one of the things that she told me that really stuck with me is that you just have to worry about a niche, and then anything else will happen. If you find, you would be better off selling your book to 5 people that become fanatics rather than 100 people that like forget about you, because those 5 fanatics are going to preach your name until it becomes 150 people. And that's how that type of thing goes. Word of mouth is your most effective marketing tool.
Yeah, it really is. And marketing, has been very tricky the past couple of years. Monster Problems came out December 2019. And we all know what happened March of 2020 in this world. So I was like, my book came out right when all this happened. And I got to do a few book events right before the pandemic. But then for a good 2 years now, I haven't been able to do much getting out there in person in my community and signing books and, visiting book fairs and things like that. I haven't been able to do much of it. Just now starting to get back into that. Everything was just online, and it was like, okay, I'm going to do what I can, but not being able to go out and see people in person made it really challenging to be able to do that. And, you know, I'm with a small publisher, you know, there isn't a budget to do a giant print run of these books and ship them out to all the bookstores and stuff. So, you know, it's easy for it to kind of fall under the radar. So you're right, finding those people who are going to trumpet the book, you know, the parents, the grandparents, the kids who are going to go on social media, who are going to go write you a review on Amazon or Goodreads and say, my child loved this book, my grandson loved this book, my daughter loved this book, you know, or the, you know, or the kid themselves, you know, putting the review up. You know, all those are just gold. And you know, and you know too, there can never be enough of that. You know, people out there, you want to support the writers in your life, you know, review their books, put a review out there. It doesn't have to be long, you can just say one sentence, you know, but just, you know, put that review out there because it just means so much and it builds momentum. You know, it really could. And that's just a struggle because you spoke of a very crowded marketplace and a very crowded world. You know, the internet kind of brings everything to you at once, and so it's like I have access to every single book, you know, ever written, you know, at all times. And so you're one little tiny grain of sand in this beach of books, you know. So it's like, how can I stand out? How can I find my audience? You know, it's very tricky stuff, and that's when you as the writer are like, okay, I got to put on my marketing hat, I got to get some advice from people, and I got to do my research, and I got to just see how can I differentiate myself, you know, so people notice, you know, my book.
Yeah, I mean, like I just gotta say, I mean, 100% agree to everything that you just said. And to add on to that, I think it's almost like a call to arms. I mean, I think, especially that we're in this independent publishing realm, where it's not like before, where you would have your idea and you would go up there like the Orphan Oliver publisher. May I have some more?
Right.
Yeah. You know,
right. How dare you? Yeah. Get out of here.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't have a romantic lead?
Right.
What? You know what I mean?
There was one typo in your manuscript. What?
You know what I mean?
Out with you. Out.
Exactly. Yeah. There is no more. And on top of that, just if you look at the things that are popular, people like a juxtaposition. You know, look at The Boys. The Boys is an Amazon Prime TV show, gritty about superheroes, right? It came out during the prime of like Marvel's Phase 4, Infinity War whole saga, which was dominating. So they literally, a show survived and thrived, and it's still being talked about to this day just because it was the one, oh, well, everything that you're seeing, this is also that, but in a way you haven't seen it before. People like a brand, like something brand new. There was I can't remember, I think it was like some masterclass. I didn't actually pay for it. It was like, you know, a YouTube like 30-second, you know, interlude or whatever. Sure. And it was like from like a very well-known editor or something like that, or whoever it was, I don't know. And they said that as far as publishing goes, as far as writing goes, that what they want to see, what they immediately green light when they get like a good manuscript, when they get a good screenplay over, is it has to be something that I've seen before, but not like I've seen before. Which seems like it seems like it's like you know, an old wise tale, or you know, something that Yoda would say to you. But when you actually think about it and like deconstruct it, it's the truest thing ever. You want something that somebody can immediately grab to. It's like, oh, that's like this thing. So that so their brain immediately starts going. It's like, oh, I also like that. I'll give this a try. But it also have to be a reason for them to watch it. You know, if you tell me, oh man, I made a book about a wizarding school and this guy has a scar on his face, like, oh, like Harry Potter. Yeah. First thing it's gonna be like, oh, I like Harry Potter. But then if you don't tell me anything new, it's like, oh, but I already read Harry Potter. Why would I read your book now? Right. If I add that, it's like, oh, it's like Harry Potter, but when they're 40 years old and there's dragons, I don't know, whatever you want. And it's like, oh, okay, I like dragons.
Sure.
And now we're here, and now we're game. So like, you just find your niche. Don't be scared to be cringy. Like I said, like, look at 50 Shades of Grey. Look at Fast and Furious. I mean, if you look at that movie with any type of critical eye, forget about it. But if you just watch to enjoy, it's just phenomenal. Absurd. Yeah. It's phenomenal. If you just sit back and you enjoy it for what it is phenomenal. And I think that for as hard as we can be on ourselves, as authors can be on ourselves, and making sure that everything is like checked off, especially when it comes to being independent, because it's like you said, you're a grain of salt, you're a grain of sand, but you
Yeah.
feel like you're a beach. So
Right.
how
Yeah.
do you get those two ideas to work with one another and like express yourself in like a manner that is becoming of the talent that you have? And I think that's it. But you shouldn't have any bounds. If somebody likes your work, just be out there, go crazy stuff, make super problems, make monster problems, make like new ideas, go out there, have some fun with it. That's why I love that's why I love this chat. That's why I love like your books. And again, if you haven't picked up to it, if you're not hip to it, if you're a child at heart, if you have some children in your life, if you're a child yourself, I don't know what you're doing up, go to sleep.
Go to bed. That's
what
right.
What are you doing?
You have school tomorrow. It's a school night. Yeah.
Pick it up. All the information will be in the bio, in the description. Instagram at Jason R. Lady Author. Twitter is at Jason R. Lady. BRW Publishers, if you want to just do a quick Google, and jasonrlady.com is the website. You Google all that information, Amazon wish list, Amazon favorites. You put notifications on, you will be notified anytime this man drops a new work. And again, if you haven't picked up his 2 books yet, you need to make sure that you do. Monster Problems, Super Problems, both out now. You've seen the covers. They're beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We're getting to that ending now. So I do just want to ask a quick 2 more questions about the future of everything. So the series that you have is the Magic Pen series.
Yes.
Right. We obviously talked at length about Monster Problems. Can you give a quick synopsis of what Super Problems is about?
Sure. So Super Problems, it's a different 6th grader. He moves to a new town. He draws himself and all his friends as superheroes in a comic book adventure. He makes new friends, draws them in this comic book adventure. They all have their own superhero identities. They all have powers. And they have a super villain who is the Stinky Sock, actually based on a smelly sock found in one of his friends' rooms. And so it's a living stinky sock that has like this cloud of odor around it. It can blast you with stench. And God. They are the Alpaca Defense Squad is the name of their superhero team. They're defending the school's pet alpaca. The school has like a pet mascot alpaca. And in the comic book, he says, the alpaca can talk. And the alpaca also has magic wool. And the Stinky Sock is after the alpaca to take that magic wool and make invincible sock soldiers out of the wool. Well, so he draws all this with the magic pen. All this becomes real. And no one can see it except the kids involved. And the alpaca is talking. And the alpaca is kind of a prima donna who is like, hey, you guys are supposed to protect me. You need to put me in a safe place, and you need to feed me, and you need to brush my wool, and you need to take care of me and stuff. And they have to deal with that annoyance as well as the Stinky Sock and all the Stinky Sock's minions. So that's what the second book is about. And it kind of takes the absurdity and the craziness of the first book and takes it up a few notches, as all good, sequels do. You can read these books in any order. You don't have to read Monster Problems before Super Problems. Like I said, they all star a different set of characters. There's some supporting characters that kind of float from book to book, and you keep seeing them. But the magic pen is really the element, the common thing that keeps showing up in different kids' lives in these different books. So Super Problems is Monster Problems, but taking up a couple notches, like I said.
God, I love your creativity. My God, I mean,
thank you.
I mean, I
don't know where this comes from. I've always been like this.
God, no, again, it's that magic of Captain Underpants. Again, I'm not kidding you at all. It brings me back. Remember those book fairs that you would have? That at first you loved, at first you loved them just because it was a quick hour out of school. You know what I mean? It was I gotta go buy some books, and
something kind of fun. Yeah,
something I'm not just getting drowned in paperwork over.
Right.
But then obviously you start loving the books after a while, and there was no better feeling than going down there and actually having some money in my pocket, because I was always broke, but actually having some money this time and going down there and seeing that new Captain Underpants book, and there was that new villain, Professor Potty Mouth, and you just see that the thing, and you just by the name you're like, I'm down. We know what's the deal.
I'm there.
It's a toilet monster. We're here. I'm down for
toilets,
this. Yeah.
Right.
That's what that just brought me back to, that type of energy. So I definitely want to see more in your career. What do you have just to kind of cap it off of? What is the future? Do you have a third book coming out in the Magic Pen series?
Well, it's funny you asked that because I do. August 18th, the third book in this series comes out. I don't have it yet, a copy of it yet. Those are still being made, but it's called Time Problems. And I haven't announced this anywhere on social media yet. So this is actually really the first I'm speaking about it. That's right. That's right. You heard it here first on the AR show. But that one is about a different middle schooler. And in fact, she's pre-middle school. She doesn't want to go to middle school. She's heard horrible things about it. She gets the magic pen, and basically, to kind of sum it up in a nutshell, she makes a way for the summer not to end. She actually draws a duck who happens to be a wizard who has the power to control time. He's the time duck. And he actually, on her behalf, freezes the summer so the summer will never end. She'll never have to go to middle school because she's heard horrible things about middle school, that the schoolwork is harder and the older kids are mean. She doesn't want to go there. But this creates, like with the other books, this creates more problems than she envisioned when she started. And again, that's a very real like angst I remember having 5th grade going to 6th grade. I was like, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. And luckily I had an older sister who was kind of like, hey, I did this. You can do it too. Come on. But for
high school, oh my God, 8th grade to 9th grade,
even worse. God. Even worse. And so I'm tapping into that anxiety that I remember, and I'm sure kids today still have it, probably even worse now, than I had it. So that is, yes, there is a 3rd book coming out, and who knows what the future holds after that. I have a nugget of an idea for a 4th one, but kind of concentrate on this 3rd one for the time being.
You heard it here first, folks. I need to have like a soundboard for when I get like first scoop, so I can do like a dum 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 or like something like that.
Bum bum, yeah,
yeah, because that is just awesome. Time Problems. You heard it here first, and now August 18th. Circle that down. We 100% have to get you back on there so we can do a nice little like release for you and like do a whole little week of like release for you. That's going to be phenomenal. I am more than excited. I love these ideas. I love everything about it. Please, people. For me,
do it for him.
Look up this man, get the books, give him some love, shout out, say the AR sent you. I'm telling you, if you're not sold, I don't know what's wrong with you. I've been sold. I was sold 40 minutes ago, honestly. 40 minutes ago, I was sold. You need to be on the same train. Jason, do you have any final thoughts before we cut it short?
Thank you for letting me be on your show. I am, very grateful for the opportunity. Like I said, marketing books during a pandemic is not easy. And so any chance I get to kind of get out there and kind of talk about them. And I enjoy these opportunities too, just to talk about writing, especially with someone like you, who's a fellow writer, and just general creativity and how we do stuff. I really relish these chances to do that and to, share thoughts, with the wider group of people who may watch and listen to this as well. But something I like to tell people, if you're out there and you're a creative person who's trying to write, do some kind of art, or if you are even just doing any kind of goal that you have, any kind of objective you might have. It took me 13 years to get published. I was querying over and over again, rejected over and over again. Finally got my publisher, got a contract in 2019. It took a while, but I didn't give up. That was the big part of it, the perseverance. So I'd say to anybody out there who's pursuing something like that, the biggest thing is not stopping and just keeping at it, and surround yourself with people that are going to encourage you and believe in you, and ignore the haters. That's the biggest advice I can give.
Well said. I've always said, well, I can't say I've always said it, because if I thought this at 13, I would have been, my God, my head would have been like this. But not that it wasn't. I mean, I have a huge head as it is. But
oh, me too. I mean, look at this thing. Yeah.
No, you have no idea. Me and hats are like mortal enemy.
Same. Extra large. Specially made. Yeah, circus tent made into a hat. Yeah.
I'm telling you, like, especially the back of my head. Like, I have like I don't know. It looks at the back, like, Voldemort in Harry Potter 1.
Yeah, kind of
that's me.
The elongated skull. Yeah, my mom used to tell me, well, you have a big brain, sweetie. That's why you have a big head. And I was like, thanks a lot. Yeah, that's what that means.
Then I looked at the science, and it was like, smarter brains are actually smaller. And I was like, huh.
Yeah, you're right. It's like, nice. Mom was just trying to make me feel better. Yeah, apparently, just trying to make me feel better.
But
I'm with you.
But honestly, I do believe that what hard is, what we consider the emotion of hard, is literally just a gauge of how worth something is. Like the hardest things are always the things that are honestly the most rewarding when it comes to the end. So just get through that mud, get through those thorns, and you will be at a rose bush at the end, and it's going to be worth it. And even if you're not, if you don't hit the success level that you have in your head, success is relative.
Yeah.
I would consider it a success just holding that book up. Just imagine being in his point of view. Imagine being Jason, having this book idea, and then being on a podcast with a person you don't know of, who probably isn't listened to by anybody, and holding a book up of your vision of exactly what you wanted it to be, and you're actually holding it as something that you want. I mean, that in itself is success, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing like having that tangible result at the end to be like, wow, I wrote this thing. That's pretty cool, And even with the third book coming out now, I can't quite wrap my head around it still. Like, I can't quite believe it, that it's actually happened. It's pretty wild.
Dude, I know.
Yeah.
My favorite is, I have a lot of short stories on my iPhone. So every so often I'll go through my notes and I'll see a short story and I'll read through it. And I'm like, man, when did I even write this? When did I even write? I'm not even saying that it's good or not. You know what I'm saying? Because again, that is relative. There's parts that I like, parts that I don't, obviously, just with anything else.
Sure.
And you go through and just like you're flabbergasted. You pick up your own book and it's like, oh man, wow, I wrote that. Because as anybody can tell you, especially when you go from 0 to 60 with writing a book, it looks like you're climbing it feels like you're climbing Mount Everest with a Speedo and 2 toothpicks.
Right.
That's what it feels like. That's what it
fall
feels
off
like.
And die any moment. Yeah.
And then you actually make it, and you're actually on the top. And it's one of those things that like you almost don't even feel like you're at the top because your body is numb now from all the freezing temperatures. It's like you have no idea. Just to get over there, you're on a completely different mind, like headspace now. But you're there. And now the other mountains just don't seem that tall anymore.
Absolutely.
And you just all you had to do was get there. So
yeah, thank you
for coming. Yeah, thank you for coming on. And just write, folks. Honestly, yes. I know sometimes that is the hardest thing for a writer to do, ironically enough. But when you sit down and it's the love of it, right? It's just getting down, you write, you be cringy, you be weird, you do whatever you want. And who knows, maybe one day you'll write a monster problems too. And you'll have some monster problems. Too much money in your bank account.
That's a problem we all want. Yeah. We all want that
problem. Again, this is going to be the end of the podcast. AR's Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I've been AR. This has been Jason. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on the ride with us, and we will be back next week with another great interview. Peace out.